Hello people of YouTube, it's DeepHack here, and welcome to DCS World 2.9.17 and Eagle Dynamics A-10C2 Tank Killer module. Welcome to tutorial 4, Targeting Pod in Air-to-Ground mode. Today we're going to demonstrate the usage of the AAQ Litening AT targeting pod as installed in the A-10C2. This is a modern targeting pod with both CCD and forward-looking infrared sensors. It's equipped with an infrared pointer, a laser designator, and it also has a laser spot search mode in the event that you want to be receiving spots from your buddies. I'll go over the basics of bringing the pod up and how to configure it. So, by default, on your right multifunction display, TGP will be one of the pages. You can simply press it to select it, or alternatively, you can press Coolie Hat right to cycle through the pages that you have on your right multifunction display. This is a hot start on the ground. When you start up on the ground, the TGP will normally be powered off. So if we look at the left-hand side of the control panel here, you'll see you've got a TGP power switch. Put it into the on position, and then we'll get the message not timed out. The pod is now going to go through its power-up cycle, and then it will cool itself down. The first 60 seconds or so is the pod doing a built-in test and powering up. There will then usually be a further 60 seconds where it cools, and during that time it will display the message FLIR hot. You need to wait until the built-in test and the cooling cycle has completed. There we go, we can now see FLIR hot. And at this point we can already interact with the pod. We could go into the control page. Oh, actually, no, we can't. I need to wait until not timed out. But you can see we've got our main modes here. There's a control page. You've got air-to-ground main mode, standby, which is in effect what it is in now, and the air-to-air mode. At the top left and top right, we have some common symbology that we're going to see once the pod is ready to use. Top left is showing us the current zoom level, which is currently at 0, and the current field of view, which is wide. This pod only has two fields of view. It has wide and narrow, and you can toggle those by pressing... how do you do that again? That is China Hat forward short. Will allow you to cycle through those. But that's actually not functioning right now. Also note that it says not soy. If we push the Coolie Hat right long, it actually won't let us do that. So yeah, we're going to have to wait until all of that's done. Anyway, top right, we've got the currently selected sensor. We're currently in CCD. And at the bottom left, we have an attitude indicator in effect. So let's give it a bit more time. It shouldn't take too much longer now, and it will fully boot up, and we can interact with the pod. Is there anything else worth mentioning? Actually, while it's doing that, let's jump into the controls. We're going to be using, like, most of the controls are actually on China Hat. So we're going to want China Hat forward and aft. I'll go over these once we have the pod up, but just to give you a quick note, China Hat forward long will slave the targeting pod to the current SPI. Forward short will change the FOV, and aft short will put you into laser spot search mode. The DMS, the up and down on the DMS will zoom the pod, and pushing DMS to the right will toggle between using the laser and the infrared pointer. Oh, actually, one other thing to note, China Hat aft long will slave to the current steer point, no matter where the SPI is. That can be kind of handy. The TMS, the target management switch, forward will put you into area or point track. Repeatedly pressing it will cycle between the two. Pressing it aft will put you into inertial tracking mode. We'll cover that in a moment. And pressing aft long will reset the SPI to your current steer point. Pushing it to the right, the TMS that is, right will create a mark point at the current location your TGP is looking, and pressing right long will make the last created mark point your current SPI. And that's kind of a handy thing. Another thing to note is that the nose wheel steering button is used for firing the laser. So we'll jump back out now, and this shouldn't take too much longer to actually come to life. There we go. Okay, we're currently in standby. It's still displaying FLIR hot, but the pod has finished powering up. If we go into the control page now, we've got some options while we're in standby. Note that none of these are actually active in the simulation, so there's no point in doing any of this. You can choose the type of calibration and you can start calibration, but that doesn't do anything. and you've got integration modes for hot and cold. That also doesn't do anything. So we can go back to return. SVC puts the pod into servicing mode. That's also not implemented. Today we're only going to be interested in the air to ground main mode. So let's press AG, and you'll note that the pod immediately powers on and displays video. We have the caption not soy. That means it's not the sensor of interest. If I press coolie hat to the right long, that message will disappear and we get a green box. We can now use the TDC to actually slew the pod. I'm going to slew it up so that we actually get a useful picture here. So let's go over some of the indications that we now have on the screen. Top left tells you the current masking mode. That will be determined by what payload you have on the aircraft. It's not something you can interact with, and it's not really important in the sim. I guess in the real world you'd verify that this matched your current loadout. Bottom left is telling us the current level of INS accuracy. This is important for the INS tracking modes, if I put it into INR here. Again, in the sim, this really doesn't matter. This is something you'd probably check in the real aircraft. Bottom, we have the current tracking mode. We're currently in inertial, INR. If I push TMS forward, we go into area track. For a moment it said INR A, which means it's in inertial mode, but it's going to try and acquire an area track. Area track is a scene contrast tracking mode, so that's based on the video that's on the screen. Obviously, if your pod gets masked, that mode won't work, and it'll go into INR-A, where it will hold the position based on the inertial reference system, and will try to reacquire an area track once it has a view of the area again. And then if I push TMS up again, we go into point track. INR-P means it's actually an inertial tracking and trying to acquire a point track. And eventually, there we go, you'll get a box once it acquires a point track. Now, a point track is going to try and track an object underneath the cursor. The good thing about this is, in point mode, if the thing you're tracking is moving, the pod will continue to track it even as it moves, which can be quite handy. Top right, we have our north arrow, so that means from the point of view of the pod's current scene that it's viewing, where is north. You'll note that as I slew around, actually let's take it out of point track, as I slew it around, that north arrow will move, or at least it should move. I guess I'm on the ground right now, so it's quite difficult to actually get the scene that I'm looking at to move enough. We will take off soon and take a little look at that. Let's come back around. You'll note this little box that's moving around. That's my situational awareness indicator. When it's forwards like this, the pod is looking forwards. Left would mean it's looking left, right, and aft. The more it moves down towards the middle of the screen, the more towards straight down it's looking. So you can imagine this as a hemisphere looking downwards from the underside of the aircraft. This number on the right-hand side here, 16M, 16 meters, this is the length of that line. It's called the yardstick. That's the length of that line where I'm pointing the pod. So if I move the pod up, at that location on the ground, that line is 4 meters across. This helps you to gauge the scale of items in your scene. So if I move the pod over here, and I get it kind of over some kind of an object, let's say this radar dish actually. So this radar dish is approximately 26 meters across using the yardstick. Bottom right is telling us where the range indication is coming from right now. If it says E, that just means it's estimated because we're slewing. If it said T, that would mean it's a slant range coming from the terrain database. And if it was L, that would mean it's a laser range. And the bottom right is the actual range. We're currently at 0.8 of a nautical mile. Something else to note, the laser is currently off, so we have no laser indications. If I move the laser switch up into the armed position, we will now get an L indicating that the laser is available. And if I press the nose wheel steering button, it's inhibited on the ground. So we'll go over that once we actually get in the air. Pressing the nose wheel steering button would actually fire the laser. That would update my range. Rather than using a calculated range, it would then give me an actual accurate range using the laser. Other things to note, at the bottom of the display is a set of coordinates. That tells you the coordinates at the location the pod is looking. Bottom left is confirming our current laser code if we were to fire the laser, and bottom right is the elevation at that location. We also have Zulu time at the bottom left here. We do have a declutter option, which will take away most of the push button labels. So that can be kind of handy. Also, with the laser on, we now have a push button to go into laser spot search. I can press that and we'll be in the search mode. Pressing it again deactivates it. And I also have a cycle here for laser, infrared pointer, or both. That controls what device will be fired when I press the nose wheel steering button. We're going to put it back into laser. You'll also note that we have a bore sight option up here. This controls where the pod will look when it comes out of standby. So if I put it back into standby, put it into air to ground, it's currently looking, I think it's milliradians, negative 150 mils. But I could put a number into the scratch pad, let's say 10, and then press this button, and it will reset the bore sight to 10. So it really depends what kind of mode you're in. I think most of the time you do want the pod looking down quite a bit while you're in flight, but you can reset that bore sight there. And if I go to the control page in air to ground mode is a little bit different. Down the left and right hand sides we have a bunch of settings. The TAAF, this is the kind of altitude warning mode basically. When it's at 0, it's turned off. I could put in here, say, 5,000 feet. And what it'll do is if I bank more than 75 degrees in roll, below that altitude, a bunch of warnings will appear on the screen. It's really designed to stop you going heads down too much and then crashing into terrain. Friend on or off controls whether or not friendly data link ground units show up in the screen. You usually get little crosses so you don't accidentally attack them. I then also have the controls for setting my laser code. This is the code that I will emit. And my laser spot search code. This is the code that I will search for in LSS modes. Again, you just use the UFC, so I could do 1667. Enter there, and I've now changed my laser code. That's also confirmed at the bottom of the display. We've got a focus reset. We can change the coordinate display between lat long, MGRS, or entirely off. And latch controls whether or not the laser is latched. So in latched mode, I just tap the nose wheel steering button once, and the laser will fire until I tap it again. In latch off, I have to press and hold the nose wheel steering button. Normally you'd fly with latch on. And then we have metric or US. This is for the, what is it called again? I keep forgetting, yardstick. So we can have it in feet, or we can have it off, or we can have it in metric. And then return will take you back out of the control page. And those are all the basics of what's in the display. Let's go over some of the HOTAS controls very quickly. So I just pressed, again, coolie hat to the right long to get this as my sensor of interest. China hat is going to allow us to slave to SPI, change field of view, go into LSS, and slave to steer point. So if I press China hat forward short, we can go into narrow. If I press it again, we go back to wide. If I press it long forwards, the China hat that is, it's going to slave to my current SPI. Now by default, your SPI is going to be your current steer point, and that's actually my initial point. I could, if I wanted to, let's go China hat up long. Nope, it's up short. Nope, it's down. I always get mixed up with these. China hat down short puts me into the HUD, being the sensor of interest. I could then go DMS up to cycle to my next waypoint again, next waypoint again, and you'll see the pod is following whatever is my current sensor point of interest. If I go coolie hat right long again, I now have the TGP again as my sensor of interest, and I could go China hat aft to go into LSS. I could press aft again to come out of LSS, and if I want to bore sight the pod, there used to actually be the ability to bore sight it by pressing China hat aft. That's been removed because apparently that's not in the real aircraft. So now if we want to bore sight, we would have to actually stand by the pod and then return to air to ground. And that's apparently realistic to the real pod. You're probably not going to do that very often. You're mostly going to switch from sensor point of interest to sensor point of interest. As I said before, the DMS up and down will allow us to manipulate the zoom. So that's independent of the field of view. And pressing DMS to the right will cycle laser, IR pointer, both, and then back to laser. You'll note that the crosshairs actually change to give you an indication of which mode you're in. So the laser is the normal crosshair. Crosshair with kind of T shaped bits on the end is the infrared pointer, and it retains that in both mode, and then back to laser. You'll also note that the letter at the bottom right here also cycles. So L for laser, P for pointer, B for both, and then back to laser. It also changes if you have the laser in training mode. So if I pop the laser down into training mode, we now have TL for training laser, P for pointer, because the infrared pointer doesn't have a training mode, and TB for training both, which means the laser is in training. And we'll pop that back into TL, and let's put the laser back into fully armed mode. Then you've got the target management switch, as I mentioned before. So forward will cycle between point and area tracks. Aft will put you into inertial mode. Aft long will reset your SPI to the current steer point. To the right will make a mark point. And right long will make that mark point the current sensor point of interest. And you can see, if we look at the TADs, you can see I've done that. I've got a mark point A, and it has the cake symbol for the sensor point of interest on it right now. So, if I was to slew my pod away, and then I was to press China hat forward long, it would immediately look back to mark point A, which is my current sensor point of interest. Okay, I think those are all the basic controls. What we'll do now is we'll get the aircraft airborne, we'll make some mark points, and we'll start slewing around. I'll be right back. Okay, you now rejoin me, and I'm in the air. In an air start, you will have the TGP already powered on and timed out. You'll also note that the laser is on. We can confirm that by looking at the HUD, and we have the L symbol there. Also, the asterisk shows us the HUD is the sensor of interest. I'm going to go DMS up a couple of times and go to waypoint number 2. That will be, by default, our SPI, or sensor point of interest. If I make the TADs my sensor of interest for a moment, and I zoom it out a little bit, you'll see there is steer point 2 with the cake symbol. So that is our current SPI. Okay, so if I go air-to-ground master mode on the TGP, it comes to life, and you'll note that we have this diamond symbol on the HUD. That is the current location the TGP is looking. If I press coolie hat to the right long, I now have control of the TGP, and you can see that as I move the TDC, that diamond is moving around. So, if I press China hat forward long, that will slave the TGP directly to our current SPI. You can see there, it's pointed over there. We can't actually see anything right now. I'm guessing we're masked. Yeah, little M symbol here means we're currently masked, or about to be masked. I can move the pod around. You can see the situational awareness indicator there moves around, and I can change my field of view and look at stuff. So, we're going to make some mark points now. I'm going to put steer point mode into mark mode in preparation for that. This is going to be a common thing that you're going to do with the targeting pod, sorry. You'll locate a bunch of targets, make mark points for them, and then prosecute them later. You'll do kind of some recon. Also note we have a diamond symbol on the TADs, which also shows the current field of view of the pod. I'm going to fire the laser for a moment. The laser's not firing. Why is the laser not firing? The laser is armed. That's interesting. Is it because I'm masked? Oh, okay. So there's obviously a different masking for the laser versus the actual video. If I bring this around a bit... There we go. Oh, masking has now disappeared. I can now fire the laser. So note, while I'm firing the laser, the L flashes, and the range indication shows L to show that we're now coming from a laser range. So that's working nicely. Right, okay, let's choose some random areas and actually make mark points. So I'm going to make a mark point here. I can do that by pressing TMS right short. Oop, I've just dropped a mark point there. Let's slew over here, and we'll make another one down here, just for fun. TMS right short again. And now let's make a mark point over here as well. Actually, let's make, it looks like buildings or something. What is that? That's a little village. TMS right again. Okay, I'm going to reset my field of view, and I'm going to put the pod into standby, and then A to G again. That rebore sights it, and then coolie hat right long makes it the sensor of interest again. Okay, so you'll note that I now have mark point steer point mode engaged, and I have these mark points. We can see them on the TADs here. If I make it sensor of interest and zoom in a little bit, we can see that we have mark points A, B, and C. Mark point A is currently the SPI. So if I make my TGP sensor of interest, and I press China hat forward long, it will immediately slew it to the current SPI. If I was then to press China hat aft short, the HUD is now the SPI, and in HUD mode, DMS up and down will actually change the current steer point, which by default is going to be my current SPI. So if I go up to B, you'll see the TGP moved. If I go up to C, it's now moved to C, and then again, we're back at A. So that would be a very, very quick way of revisiting those points. Also note that if I have the TADS as my sensor of interest, any icon that I can move my cursor over here can actually become the sensor point of interest. I can also create mark points on the map by using the TADS cursor and pressing TMS right short. You'll see that I've now just made D. I could move my cursor over D, press TMS up short to hook it, so now even when I move the cursor away, I have the hook line. But if I leave the cursor over it and press TMS up long, you'll see the cake symbol appeared, the diamond moved, and my TGP is now looking at that point. So if you wanted to reference a point using the map and then move the TGP to it, that's also an option. Let's get control of the targeting pod again. And just for testing's sake, let's go China hat switch aft short. And you'll see I'm now in laser spot search. And I'm looking for whatever I've programmed as my laser spot search code. And press it again and I can come out. So if I went into control, I was looking for LSS on 1688. Just to note that. You also have the boat switch, which allows you to change the current sensor. In the middle position, it's CCD. I can press boat switch forward to go into black hot FLIR mode. If I pull it aft, I'm in white hot FLIR mode. And that allows me to have an infrared image. Note that when I have the FLIR selected, I get extra options down the left-hand side for adjusting that image. So by default, I can adjust the gain using these controls, but I can also cycle it to level. So I can change my level and then switch back to gain and change the gain settings just to tease the most information out of that thermal image. So just be aware that that setting is there. Also note that if I bring up the control page now, I get an extra couple of settings. You have automatic gain control, which I don't think is implemented. And then you've got integration for hot and cold, which I know is not implemented. But these are settings specific to the FLIR sensor. And then we can return. So that's all the basics, really. Actually, one last thing. You can change quickly using the DMS switch right which actual emitter you're using. So currently we're in laser mode. DMS right will put us into infrared pointer. Very useful at night because it shows up in night vision goggles. Oh, we're about to mask. Pressing it right again puts us into both, where it will fire the laser and the infrared pointer. And then DMS right again puts us back into laser only. Note that if I have the laser in training mode, you will see TL for training laser. Cycle it to the right, I get pointer. There is no training mode for the pointer. Right again, I'll get TB for training both. And then right again, I get training laser. Let's pop the laser back into armed. Okay, that's all the basics of operating the TGP in the A-10C2. I hope you all enjoyed that. Fly safe, and I'll see you next time.